It's Friday, May 27th. You're tuned into Real Talk. Studio's banging this morning. We got tunes cranked. We got the coffee going.
The city is alive.
The city, our home city of Edmonton, Alberta, is alive with the sound of a third-round advancement. The Edmonton Oilers taking down the Calgary Flames in a spirited but
Is this real?
ice-tilted Battle of Alberta. My buddy Chivers and I were chatting this morning. Chivers, Lozzie, and I, we got this little, this group text where we've been talking about the Battle of Alberta. A fan from Calgary, a fan from Edmonton, and a fan stuck in the middle. And the review from Calgary this morning, the ice completely tilted as soon as we went up a few goals in Game 2. This from the Flames fans' perspective. I don't know what changed, he says. We just had no answer for the star power of the Oil. He goes on to say Colorado-Edmonton would be an unreal series. Colorado trying to get past St. Louis right now.
Let's be honest. It's this guy right here in his celly last night.
97.
Connor McDavid, the
Unbelievable.
Lord and Savior.
Oh,
Nick
geez.
Jesus.
Well, how about Leon Draisaitl, too, setting a record for points in a series, the most points, 5 games in a row with 3 points or more. Woo! A lot of other stuff going on, including some like painful real life stuff, some stuff that we have to wrestle with and grapple with. But every once in a while, sports gives us that escape. And what fun it was last night to see the Edmonton Oilers shake that one off. Lose one, go down 9-6. You lose 9-6 in Game 1, and then you just win 4 in a row. No big deal.
I feel like every game it was like against the ropes. We win. It was just like it was back and forth. And look at these faces. Like these guys.
Zach Hyman, Darnell Nurse, Evander Kane with an amazing series. Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins.
Nuge got his finally.
Unreal. And so, anyway, amazing stuff. I guess this means that Calgary's Mayor Jyoti Gondek is going to be painting her face orange and blue, and Calgary's entire city council is going to be wearing Oilers sweaters, right? What are the terms of the bet again, Johnny?
They're right there. So the losing city council is going to wear the winning team's gear to council, and then the losing mayor, of course, Calgary's mayor, going to have to paint orange and blue on her face, and then the losing team, Oilers, going to donate to a cancer. The Flames are going to donate to a cancer foundation in the winning team's name.
It seems to me like Mayor Sohi from Edmonton should do the painting, should do the face painting for Mayor Gondek down in Calgary. Like he could actually do the designs, do a big oil drop, like do it like a teardrop, like the oil drop down the cheek kind of thing.
Might not be that great.
That'd be pretty good. We've got a great show coming up. We have our official, unofficial Real Talk correspondent, Gillian E, is going to join us. You see her in the live chat all the time. She writes us amazing emails all the time, and I was like, Gillian, I don't want to read your email. Just come on the show. Just come talk to us. And so she's making a Real Talk debut in just a bit. Supriya Dwivedi in a regular Friday spot. And then we blew up our plan. We had another roundtable locked and loaded, and then we blew up that plan because there's been a development that we don't typically spend a lot of time on this show. We know that we have an audience across the country, a big audience, obviously in Western Canada and in our home province of Alberta, but we don't talk a lot about municipal issues, except for this story is different. Alberta's Justice Minister, the Solicitor General, sending a letter to Edmonton's mayor about the crime downtown. It's been a story in the city of Edmonton over the past week or so. Actually, a tragic circumstance. If you didn't hear, 2 people just killed, murdered in Chinatown. Police say by the same person. Everybody's talking about crime in downtown Edmonton. So we've got 3 Edmonton city councillors that are going to join us, not just to talk about the crime rates, not just to talk about the letter from the province and what that did. Word is that there were some folks a little bit upset at Edmonton City Hall yesterday, but bigger picture. We'll get into it with councillors Ann Stevenson, Sarah Hamilton, and Andrew Knack coming up. We're grateful that they've agreed to join us on short notice. This show happens because of sponsors like Bitcoin Well. We get feedback from you sometimes. We love when we do. And we get, notes from people like Ann, who wrote in and said, I thought you might want to know about a withdrawal I made through Bitcoin Well the other day. She says, as you may or may not know, putting funds in with Bitcoin's easy, but taking them out has been a real challenge for a lot of people. Not anymore, says Ann. Not an employee of Bitcoin Well, by the way, and not an employee of Real Talk. She says Bitcoin Well makes it a seamless process. She says you put in the request, you select what funds you want, Canada, U.S., whatever, give them your wallet information, email address, voila, it's done. She says, easy as pie, I would recommend it to anyone and everyone. Yes, they also answer questions about putting money in. I'm just saying, great company, great service. I'm thankful they're here in Alberta with a phone number if there's a challenge. That from Ann. Thanks for the email, Ann. You can find Bitcoin Well under the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
So, earlier this week, the official French language debate held with candidates seeking the leadership of the federal Conservative Party. And I know that some Real Talkers were watching that. Supriya's going to chime in on it in just a few moments. We got an email from Gillian Essien, who's a great friend of this show. She's a Montrealer, born and raised, McGill grad in biology, chemistry, and education. She lived in England for 10 years. She taught chemistry at an all-boys school. She's currently a French immersion, math, and science teacher here in Edmonton. She says in her bio, sadly, if not obviously as well, she's a middle child. But Gillian grabbed all of our attention when, Gillian, you disclosed to us after our interview, our one-on-one with Jean Charest seeking the Conservative leadership, that you were so impressed with Mr. Charest that you went out and purchased a Conservative Party membership, and you've been paying closer attention to the race now. Welcome to Real Talk, and thanks for making time for us. It's nice to see your face.
Thanks. It's an honor to be here. This is so cool. As you know, I've been chatting to you by email for years. This is so cool. I'm so happy that I'm here and you've got this show. This is amazing.
Well, this is the first time that we've actually talked face to face, but I've called you a friend for a long time. I used to joke with people when I had my show on the radio, on terrestrial radio. I used to have to change it up with your comments on the text line because otherwise I'd be accused of favoritism. I'd be reading them too much. And so you would either be Jillian, Jill, or G. And in some circumstances, you would have comments read back to back. Jillian says this, G says that. So I've always appreciated your perspective, but I like it. You've come from Eastern Canada. You speak both French and English. You're a mom. You're an educator. You come at this from a bunch of different angles. To refresh the audience memory, I did read your email a while back, but what was it in particular that prompted you to buy a CPC membership? What was it about Mr. Charest?
So like I mentioned before, I'm a little bit biased because I grew up in Quebec and under Charest as well. And things were definitely, not terrible. Quebec is a different situation because in Quebec, it's not so much about who you want to vote for. At the time, it either is separatist or those who are going to keep us in Canada. So Charest did a good job with that. And when he came on your show and he actually was proposing solutions as opposed to blaming Trudeau for everything and not having any ideas, I was like, okay, I'm going to actually buy a membership for the first time and see if I can maybe help get someone with a different voice and some actual ideas into the leadership of the Conservative Party. Just have an option. Mm-hmm. I'm proudly independent. I'm a political nerd. I will read manifestos and policy documents and all of that, and then I choose which parties line up with my values. So it doesn't mean I will vote Conservative, but I want a choice. We haven't really had a choice.
And you're like me, and you're like, I bet, millions of other Canadians, where our vote is up for grabs, right? I mean, have you voted for different political parties in past? Like, did I do something to my mic, Johnny? There we go. Have you voted for different political parties in past? Like, you may vote for one party and then 4 years later vote for a different one?
Yeah, and funny enough, growing up in Quebec, you didn't really have a choice. You literally voted for whatever party was not the separatist party. But then coming out of Quebec, I definitely have voted for different parties. Living in England, I voted Conservative. I voted the Liberal equivalent, and here I voted NDP. I wouldn't vote NDP federally, but NDP here is definitely not left party in my view. So I voted for them because I consider them more centrist. So my vote, as a good Quebecer, my vote is always up for grabs.
Okay, good stuff. So there's obviously sort of a different dynamic. There's different issues discussed. There's a different vibe, maybe different implications when it comes to a French language debate. What were some of the key things you were looking for heading into the debate this week?
I was looking for the politicians to actually say the same things in the French debate as they were saying in the English debate, which in the past wasn't always the case. And I think now they actually know that voters are paying attention, and they made sure they did. So that was the first thing I was looking for. I was also looking to see if Poilievre would change his stance a little bit in Quebec, which he didn't. And I think he didn't hit very well in Quebec because he kind of brought a lot of his Western talking points and they didn't work so well. So yeah, I just was looking for consistency between the candidates, their messaging in English and in French.
Okay, so let's get to what you actually observed. Who impressed you most?
Okay, it was a firefight in some ways.
It was.
I could start with who didn't impress me. So sadly, Baber and Aitchison, for the first time, I actually forgot they were in the debate at all. Like I forgot they were in the room. It was probably due to language. Patrick Brown came out absolutely firing. He was gunning for Pierre Poilievre from the beginning, and it's always cute when they struggle with their French a bit because it's kind of like a toddler trying to find their words, but he didn't matter. Like he was going for him. So I was impressed with the fire that came from Patrick Brown. Charest, as expected, just came across as the statesman, and Pierre Poilievre. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Leslyn Lewis, she impressed me, and I think she would have impressed a lot of Quebecers because she really made an effort to speak French. She stayed in there. She was rebutting in French and so on. And she also talked about how much she loved learning French. And that really, if you tell Quebecers that you love French and you're trying to learn it, they'll love you to death. And she came across as really endearing.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? Johnny, I know this is ahead of when I asked for it. Can you call up Supriya's tweet for me? Let me show this to you. I'm going to talk to Supriya right after we chat with you. And she put out this assertion yesterday, and she's right. She says in her assessment, this was just one of a thread. She says, anyway, you can't be prime minister if you don't speak French. So, I don't know what everybody else is doing on that stage, which I thought was pretty good. Everybody remembers back in the day, Preston Manning trying to learn French as quickly as he could so he could be considered a legitimate candidate. Now, it's kind of, I don't know if funny is the right word, but it's kind of funny that you're going, and Dr. Leslyn Lewis, kind of impressive. And I'm going, interesting. I wonder what Gillian's about to say here. And you go, just because she was trying to speak the language. So it really almost, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it had nothing to do necessarily with the content of what she was presenting, just the fact that she was trying to demonstrate some proficiency in the language, right? That's a different thing, right? The French language debate to a certain degree for some people is just an opportunity to exhibit to Canadians that they can speak French.
It is definitely, and it's important, and especially from Quebec. Quebecers live with that constant, especially the French Quebecers, the constant paranoia that their rights and freedom, liberty as Quebecers to speak French, work in French, educate their children in French across the country will be taken away. So when you see candidates that speak the language and have an appreciation for your language, it definitely makes you feel more secure. You're less likely to run to the Bloc Québécois. And that's one of the problems that I foresee with Pierre Poilievre is he's not offering that type of freedom to Quebecers. He's not, in Quebec, in French, we don't have the word free. We have libre or gratuit. So liberty in a way or cheap. And I feel Pierre Poilievre is offering a cheap kind of freedom. Buy one, get one free, vote for me, and you don't have to wear masks. That's not, Quebecers care about their liberty. They want to live as French people in the full, love of their language and passing that on. And that's not the freedom that Poilievre is offering. So that's where I kind of feel he might end up being the Conservative Party leader, but he's going to have to figure out how he's going to get some votes in Quebec.
I thought it was interesting.
Message,
Sorry, I stepped on your toes. I didn't mean to, Gillian. You said you wrote to us on Wednesday night. You wrote, Pierre's performance tonight in Quebec makes me believe that if he does win the Conservative leadership, there's no way the Conservatives could challenge the federal Liberals. No way, no how, just no. Which I thought was good. But quite a contrast. To state the obvious in closing, what a contrast between the reception that the perceived frontrunner Pierre Poilievre gets in Western Canada and at the English language debate versus in Eastern Canada at the French language debate.
Yeah, and I was surprised that he did not change his talking points, because it's one thing to go to the English debate in the West and tell everyone that Charest did a bad job in Quebec, and he tried to reuse that. What about this? What about this? What about this? He tried to reuse that in Quebec. But the difference is Quebecers were there. So they're like, I think I remember if Charest was really horrible and taxed me to death and all of that. And I feel Poilievre quickly, before 2025, has to figure out Quebec. Because 9 years of Charest, no matter what he does, is 9 years of not having to go to bed, worried that you're going to wake up in a separatist province. It's 9 years of not having that constant battle with the federal. So you can't easily knock Charest. Our reality in Quebec is very different. My parents were there during the FLQ uprisings. I grew up during the 90s referendum. It's a constant battle. And whenever the Liberals are in power over there, it's a bit of peace. So trying to attack Charest in Quebec is, you need to find something different. You need to go at it at a different angle. He probably still might end up being conservative leader, but you need to figure out how you're going to get some seats, because at the moment we need a different Pierre Poilievre.
She swings in, she just drops down, asked to leave her email on the table and instead step in front of the microphone and absolutely slays in her Real Talk debut. You know what this means, Gillian? We're going to have to look to you for correspondent work down the line. I mean, when you do a job like this.
I just want to add that you say my emails are great, but I had to buy my own mug.
Oh!
So I'm just saying that's okay. That's okay.
No, actually, you know what I'm going to do?
Show.
I don't have one. I don't have one here to show it to you right now. You know what I'm going to do?
Send her a merch
Johnny,
pack.
can you take my screen right now? Jillian, have you seen our new wool knit caps? Have you seen these things?
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I love a toque.
People
I love a cap.
Yeah, these are, so we've got our, what am I talking? We got our snapback caps. We got some new caps coming, by the way. They're absolutely balling. I think we're going to debut them at the Real Talk Golf Classic on June 23rd. But Jillian, we have our toques here. They're handmade by Clothes General. He's a leather worker here in Edmonton, available in charcoal heather or royal blue. What would you prefer? What would be your preference?
I have quite a few charcoal hats, so let's go Quebec blue.
Oh, Quebec blue! I love it. We're going to fire off an email. Shoot me your address, and we'll get that in the mail like early next week, my friend.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much.
It's an honor to be here. And good luck with baby number 2.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. Who knows? Like, I don't even know if we're doing a show Monday. We're gonna find out. We're gonna see. We got some guest books, but they know they might be canceled at the last minute if we're in labor and delivery. Anyway, Jillian, it's so nice to like actually just hear your voice, see your face, and I want to thank you for just being such a great friend of the show. Have an amazing weekend.
You too.
There
Bye.
you go. Take care. That's Gillian Essien coming up in just 1 minute, literally 1 minute. Supriya Dwivedi. First, I want to remind you that Athabasca University is Canada's online university. I like that play by Gillian. She's like, my emails are so good. What's up with this bullshit? I had to buy my own coffee mug. She's referencing the Real Talk email of the month, right? Once a month, we pick out a killer email and we send you a coffee mug for free. She bought hers because she's an amazing friend of the show. There you go. Ask and ye shall receive. Athabasca University has world-class accredited online programs and courses that give you flexibility. So whether you need to step away from your duties or step out of your schedule because, your family has a new arrival, or maybe there's an emergency, or maybe you get sick, or maybe you have a chance to go travel Belize. Whatever it is, if you want to take a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of months away from your studies, you don't fall behind because you're working on a schedule that suits your lifestyle. It's more than 40,000 students are choosing Athabasca University because of those reasons, also because of its reputation as a research university. You can learn more at athabascau.ca. And this is a great weekend to be visiting the Friesen brothers in your neck of the woods, 16 of them across the province of Alberta, including in South Edmonton. Their Rabbit Hill location just marked its 1-year birthday in this month, the month of May. What an unbelievable place. Don't take my word for it. Just ask Johnny, because I'm always talking about the real butchers and the real Alberta beef and the pork and the chicken and the turkey and all that jazz, but they got a ton of plant-based options too.
Something for everyone there. Fresh vegan pizzas. It's incredible.
You know the move you got to make sure you pull. This is the veteran move we're telling you about when you go to the South Edmonton Friesen Brothers. Right when you go in, go straight to the pizza area because they'll do them up for you fresh, and then they put them in. You have about 12 to 15 minutes while it bakes. They give you a little buzzer. It's like a little pager kind of a thing. When your pizza's ready, it just starts buzzing. Yeah. And you go, if you can do your grocery shop. I mean, I'm not talking about the big shop, the first of the month where you get 15% off, $75 or more. I'm just talking about when you go in, grab a few things, walk out with your hot pizza.
Hit the taps,
hot
have
diggity.
a drink.
Yeah, craft beer on tap at a grocery store. What? Check out more at Friesen.com. All right, Supriya Dwivedi's like our best friend and our favorite, and she joins us every Friday right around this time. Although we did keep you sitting here for a little while because I won't say I made a new friend. I've considered Gillian a friend for a long time, but how cool to get an audience member on and realize that she's probably better than I'm not talking about you, Supriya, but like half of our political commentators, because she just cuts through the noise. I love it. Nice to see your face too.
Yeah, always good to see your face, Ryan.
Yeah, but we've got a lot to talk about, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. But why don't we start with what I was just talking to Gillian about? You're also a born and raised Montrealer. You joined us from Oakville right now, but of course you were paying close attention Wednesday night to the French language debate, the Conservative leadership debate. What was one of the main storylines that jumped out at you?
Just how well I think Jean Charest really performed. He performed much better than I think he has in previous debates and in previous sort of interviews that he's given. Just had a lot of energy, right? He had a bunch of good one-liners and zingers out there. But, ultimately his biggest challenge still remains the same, and that's he has to sign up a bunch of new members. So, whether or not this really affects the standing in terms of the race, I can imagine that his team is really trying to sign up new members and, convince folks that they should get a membership based on that debate performance. And, maybe that works, but it's still kind of a tough hill to sort of climb. And I think just based on what we've seen in terms of polling, it's very likely that Pierre Poilievre is still leading. And I think Patrick Brown is still a bit of a wild card because, he's been keeping his head down and has really been doing what I would say it's like acute community outreach, right? Like he's doing much smaller gatherings and really focusing on, different demographics to try and bring them into the fold. But yeah, I don't know. Like my main takeaway is that on that debate stage, Jean Charest was really the only one that came across as like prime ministerial.
Yeah. Did you get the sense that I was just talking to Gillian about this as well? You see the audience maybe not buying what Pierre Poilievre was selling to a certain degree, getting a bit of a tougher reception than he does in Western Canada, to state the obvious. What do you read into that, like at a deeper level?
I mean, look, the debate, I think, was in Laval, right? So I would imagine that Charest people packed the hall or whatever it was called with their own people. I don't know if that's necessarily indicative of the overall reception that Pierre would get in Quebec. And I wouldn't want to read too much into that. But I think just generally, a lot of the attack lines that Pierre has been throwing at Charest kind of fall flat in a Quebec audience because, I've said this before on the show, but yeah, he was a liberal premier, but in Quebec, at least in the time when, Charest was premier and basically my entire life, like Quebec liberals have tended to lean more conservative, very, not unlike the way BC liberals tend to lean a lot more to the right than I think we would traditionally think of liberals. So all of those attacks of, you haven't done X, Y, or Z, or you're liberal light, like it doesn't make sense in Quebec, particularly when under Charest, like, Quebec wasn't doing so bad in a lot of respects.
I love when you come on because we kind of jump all over the place, and sometimes it's stories that people have been talking about all week, and sometimes it's developing stories, and people across the country will be talking about this decision. The Supreme Court of Canada unanimously striking down life without parole for mass murderers. It was retroactive to the time it was enacted about 11 years ago in 2011. It gives a large number of sentenced killers hope of release someday. You're a lawyer. I think a lot of people know that. How do you process this?
Yeah, I mean, I went to law school. I'm not a practicing lawyer, so I'll just put that out there.
I always say that to the lawyer. They always have to clarify it. I should be better at that.
No, it's all good. But yeah, look, I don't think this was necessarily surprising. It was a unanimous decision. All 9 justices were of this opinion. And I think a lot of constitutional and criminal lawyers prior to this decision being rendered were very much sort of leaning this way and saying that was likely where the court was going to go. And you're right, this does have a ton of implications. And I mean, even in the more recent past, we're talking about, the mass New Brunswick killer now being affected by this and will likely be eligible for parole much earlier than intended. And the Toronto van attack mass murderer is going to be eligible for parole much earlier than intended, as well as like a whole slew of others. But I think this just really goes to the heart of sometimes being tough on crime, as good and it might make people feel, it doesn't always craft the best sort of policy solution. And I mean, we're seeing that now. And I think there are a ton of criminal lawyers right now that are on social media that are trying to, encourage people not to get too panicked about this, because just because you're eligible for parole doesn't mean you're going to get it, right? And so I think we need to be careful with the sort of narratives that we run away with because of this one decision.
Yeah, but everybody just thinks of Karla Homolka, right? I mean, that's pretty much the Canadian case study for somebody getting parole. And people trying to wrap their minds around it. What's like, just as I'm asking you, I guess, as you're a political commentator, strategist, and all this, but also just as a human, where do you sense that Canadians are at? When we were talking about David Milgaard's passing, I think it was last week. I talked to Janet Pruden, amazing storyteller with the Globe and Mail.
Amazing,
you know, and it comes up, and there were comments from our audience members as well that were saying, this makes me glad that Canada doesn't have capital punishment, or Canada doesn't have the death penalty. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, with regards to where we're at, even globally, you look at how Sweden manages some of its prisons, really interesting stuff, like a relatively minimum security for some pretty significant, convicted criminals. I mean, those types of things. Where do you get where Canadians' attitudes are at with regards to, the Harper government was big on mandatory minimums and saw some support from Canadians there. But with regards to, like, locking people up and throwing away the key, or taking people to the electric chair, so to speak, that kind of American attitude, or at least in some states, where you have your finger on the pulse of Canada, where are Canadians at with crime and punishment?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, I would say in terms of, capital punishment, that ship has sailed in Canada for quite some time, right? And I don't think there's very many corners that are sort of clamoring to bring it back. And I think it's difficult to sort of think about criminals in a level-headed manner when you're talking about such atrocious killers, right? Like when you're talking about the Toronto van attack, or you're talking about this mosque terror shooter who shot up those, congregants in an act of terror. Like, these are all issues that I think tug at our heartstrings in a very visceral and primal way. So it's understandable why I think so many Canadians would be like, well, fuck them, like, just keep them there forever. But if the purpose of the justice system is to rehabilitate folks writ large, then you do have to consider that aspect as well when we're thinking about our prison system, I think, more generally. And you mentioned Sweden, and that's a very good example. And it's interesting. I don't think Canadians are necessarily there yet politically. It's also not exactly a vote getter to say that you're going to go, a little bit lighter on criminals or give them a lighter touch. That's not exactly a ballot box winner. So, our politics are sort of incentivized not to really talk about prison or justice reform in a more, comprehensive or holistic manner.
What do you say about what happened in Uvalde, Texas this week? I don't even know, it's just like such a disaster. I mean, it's just a disaster of gun policy. It feels like just such a failing of a society. That schools get shot up, and I know you're on Twitter. You've probably seen this list. People are copying and pasting it to their profiles of just a list of school shootings that have happened, I think, since 2017. You have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. We saw this story last night that one of the teachers that was killed, her husband just dropped dead of a heart attack at 50 years old yesterday. They leave behind 4 kids, 19 children killed minimum. There's others that are injured. I mean, it's just, Supriya, like, what do you say? I don't know if you're the same as me. You have your own child's face in your mind as you process stories like this. And I see people rightfully so saying, I don't want to see any more conversations on, cable news about, how do you talk to your kids about gun violence? Or I don't want to hear any more, like, I don't even know how you wrap your mind around it. You can't not talk about it, obviously, but at the same time, people go, yeah, Trump's still showing up to the NRA convention this weekend. I saw that Don McLean pulled out of, the American Pie singer pulled out of the NRA convention from performing there. The New York Times this morning, the headline of an op-ed, nothing's going to stop the NRA's gun orgy in Texas. Thoughts on this?
I mean, look, it's not just the NRA, right? It's like the politicians that are beholden to them.
Yeah.
Like, it's all well and good to make the gun lobby as like the bad guy here, but the actual bad guys are the politicians that refuse to do anything about this. And, ultimately that's also on the electorate that supports them. And it's not as simple as that, because there's a lot of gerrymandering and a lot of voter suppression that goes on. And, there are basically these politicians represent a fraction of the population in terms of being hardened, do not do anything about gun control supporters. So it's just, I think we need to get out of the mindset of just America being this like pinnacle of democracy and something that other countries should strive to be, because it's like they're not on every scale. Like they really need to get their shit together. We're talking about gun control in terms of mass shootings, but like, Chris Selly of the National Post pointed out this week that there are roughly 5 times as many Americans that die in unintentional shootings and mass shootings, right? Or 65 times as many die by suicide. Like if they just had very minimal gun control legislation or a regulatory framework, it would cut down on death a lot. And, all of this rhetoric that we get from right-leaning politicians in the States is all this bullshit about like, Ted Cruz is talking about, well, if there was only one door, it's like, okay, well, fuck, now you want to put kids in prison, basically. Like this school was already hardened in terms of, having all sorts of fences, and that small town of Uvalde of 16,000 people, they had like a SWAT team that was there. Like this is also about like police in action. I don't know if you saw any of those videos, Ryan, but they're like fucking handcuffing parents
getting
them,
tased. The
them.
dad
like,
got
what is this?
Tased trying to get into the school because for 40 minutes nobody's going in there. I'm not going to pretend like I'm SWAT. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a trained law enforcement officer. I was talking to some first responders last night about this. They're firemen, but they're used to staged events, which means that police have to go in first before they can go in. Sometimes it could be a crime scene or what have you. And they said, hey, listen, like to be fair to these officers, if you don't have good information, you can't just go in. And then one of the other guys in the conversation says, like, fuck, you can't just go in.
Yeah.
He says, there's kids getting shot in an elementary school. What do you mean you can't just go in? And they go, well, your life, you could be put in danger. And he goes, well, that's your job.
Yeah.
Like I'm being an armchair quarterback right now. I recognize that from another country, from, thousands of kilometers away. But at the same time, I was trying to put myself in the shoes of a parent that is outside that school. My child's inside that school, and there's an active shooter barricaded in there. I would be a wild animal. I would do anything to get in that building.
Of course, any parent would have done whatever they could have to get into that fucking building to get their kid out, right? Or kids, multiple out. And the fact that the police, were actually turning their ire onto the parents, I think is a whole other conversation unto itself. And I think it really highlights a whole other slew of problems. But like, as we're talking about gun control, we should probably also be talking about like police reform in America. But ultimately, I don't know if anything is going to get done. Sandy Hook was 10 years ago. As of in December, it'll have been a decade, right? And like, if they decided then that they weren't going to do anything, I'd like to think that 10 years later and another horrific mass shooting of literal children being gunned down would be enough. But it's not like we're seeing a ton of Republican legislators really saying, yeah, this is the tipping point. This is what we need to do. So until you get those folks to really want to do something, or to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate, like I don't know. I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, there was this father. I get emotional. I'm a very emotional person. I think I just like, I can't watch an interview with a parent that's still in shock. It also you're talking
about the Anderson Cooper one?
Yeah, well, I'm talking about that father, a Latino guy, had the sunglasses on, had a mustache, shorter stature guy. Just his face, I can start crying if I think about it. But like, he's talking about his 10-year-old daughter and just the light of his life and this beautiful, wonderful. They're showing her picture and her eyes are just so bright, her future so bright, and her life snuffed out by this killer. And the father says, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that her life was not lost in vain. And you know what my first response was, which is so sad, was just recognizing that father will do everything he can, I'm sure, and he will commit his efforts, I'm sure, to honoring the memory of his daughter. And nothing's going to happen because we all know the names of the students that survived schools like Columbine, and we all know the names of the parents, or maybe we're forgetting them, shame on us, the parents from Sandy Hook, and they've been working, and parents like Shannon Watts, who like is gun control advocacy in the States with hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter. And this father, this grieving father, will join a community of grieving parents. but I don't know if their efforts are ever going to pay off. And that is a huge gut punch for everybody.
Yeah. And like, it's so demoralizing if you live in that country, right? Like, imagine being a parent and you're like, I don't know, like every morning as you're dropping your kid off, you're like, what, saying a silent prayer? You're like, have your fingers crossed and saying, I hope you get through the day safely. Like that's such an immense burden to think of every single GD day when you're in a country like that. Like I can't imagine that. And I can't imagine the sort of inaction that they receive from the quote unquote leaders that they have in charge.
Yeah. Hey, listen, you've got to go literally in 1 minute. So I just want to ask you this really quickly because I'm watching from halfway across the country, but I'm just trying to figure out with regards to this Ontario election coming up in less than 2 weeks. You knew I was going to ask you real quick. It strikes me that despite the fact that we're on our way out of a pandemic that has exhausted healthcare workers, that has taken a major toll on the healthcare delivery across the provinces, but Ontario included for sure. I'm watching as best I can some of the coverage. I'm reading as many columns as I can, and I don't see a lot of people talking about healthcare.
They're not. And it doesn't make any fucking sense because we're in the middle of a pandemic election. As you mentioned, burnt down healthcare workers, massive surgical backlog, right? I think there's like a million surgical surgeries and procedures that are backlogged. We have long COVID issues that are looming. Doug Ford is going to further privatize long-term care homes. And we know from the data that they had much worse outcomes for residents in Ontario than the public long-term care system did. And so I just like, if we're not going to talk about healthcare now, then when the heck are we? And, to be fair to Ontario, we also had a federal election in the middle of a pandemic. And it's like, we didn't really have a substantive conversation about healthcare then either. We almost did, right? When the Liberals put out that video that had clipped O'Toole saying something along the lines of finding efficiencies, but then the conversation turned into like ethics in Twitter video posting, and we never talked about the substance. And it was weird because O'Toole in that video didn't say anything that was like out of step or out of line with mainstream conservative, both capital C and small c thinking, right? Like finding efficiencies within the system, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is like totally within the realm of normal conversation. And yet we didn't talk about it, and we're not talking about it again. And like, it's just a real shame because I don't think we really, or the public, when I say we, has a good understanding of just how fucked our healthcare system is going to be in the next, 5, 10, 15 years because of all this. And it was already in like not the best sort of shape. The pandemic has exacerbated all of it. And we're basically all screwed. So yeah, get out and vote if you care about healthcare. And, it shouldn't be for the folks that were in charge during this. And, a lot of it isn't solely on this government. Multiple governments of Liberal and Conservative stripe have let the system get to the point where it is. But, in terms of the burning out of healthcare workers, in terms of like cutting pay for nurses in the middle of a pandemic, like, further privatizing LTCs, like that is on this government. And, you mentioned off the top, and it's very true, Ontario, we certainly weren't the worst performer in this country. And a lot of other provinces failed their people as well. But that shouldn't absolve, the folks in charge here simply because folks elsewhere did it worse. I don't know. Like it's like we're not as bad as Kenny or Mo. Shouldn't be a bumper sticker.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're not the worst. That's the big endorsement. Yeah. Vote, keep us in office. We're not the worst. Supriya Dwivedi is the Director of Policy Engagement at the Center for Media, Technology and Democracy at McGill University. She's Senior Counsel with Enterprise Canada. You see her on Power and Politics. You've read her work in the Toronto Star, the National Observer. And every Friday, you can catch her here on Real Talk. Thanks for doing this and have an amazing weekend.
Always a pleasure, Ryan. Talk soon.
All right, my friend. Take care. Always love checking in with Supriya Dwivedi. This is kind of like literally a last minute roundtable. This is so last minute, this roundtable coming up, that we've even seen some shuffling since we went live. Wheels up about 40 minutes ago. We've had a shuffle to our panel.
We mixed up the roster.
We mixed up the roster a little bit, which is great because these councillors, these 3 city councillors, we're going to get to them in just a second, are like shuffling around their meetings and changing their obligations because they want you, Real Talkers, to be able to hear what what they have to say, and we really appreciate that. So we were going to be talking to Ann Stevenson. She's my city councilor, in fact. We're talking my hometown, our hometown right now, and an issue that's a matter of, I think, provincial importance. The Solicitor General sending a I don't know. I don't want to put words in these counselors' mouth, but I would characterize it as somewhat of a big dogging letter, kind of like an inflammatory letter yesterday. Ann Stevenson with the Police Commission, she was going to join us, but Erin Rutherford's going to step in along with Sarah Hamilton, Andrew Knack. That coming up in just a second. First, I want to tell you about Eden Landscaping. They've got this new approach to their designing front yards. It's pretty on trend because a lot of people are, quite frankly, just getting sick of mowing their lawn and then watering their lawn, and then taking care of the dandelions, and then mowing their lawn again, and then taking care of the dandelions, and then watering their lawn, and then mowing their lawn. And well, you get the idea. Instead, this urban front yard butterfly approach takes native grasses, takes a look at maybe what might be best ecologically for your yard, like what could you plant there that might draw pollinators in, that might help the environment, and might also be a little bit easier on the eyes. You know, you can address your curb appeal, plus cut down on your water bills, and not spend all Saturday mowing. You can find out more and get a free quote today. You can check out their portfolio, their services, and learn more about Eden Landscaping at landscapeedmonton.ca. I know, no doubt, it's going to be a busy weekend at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. That's because they've got better selection on the Jeep, Ram, Dodge lineups than anybody else in the province. You say, well, that's a bold claim. Well, they've got 2 dealerships. They can share inventory, so you can browse them online right now. You'll find the link under the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com. The new, the pre-owned, even the specials you can book in for parts and service. I mean, basically shop from the comfort of your own home. If you'd rather browse the lot, if you're like me, if you want to feel the leather, you can go see them in person. They're happy to help you out. Proud of their service record. Look at this, a brand new 2022 Dodge Challenger X SXT Coupe on for $41,688 right now. That's not going to last long at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. And a shout out to our friends at Park Power. They're powering our hashtag RealTalkRJ. That's a way to stay on top of interviews we're pushing out, heads up we're giving you, and of course what some people are saying about the show. Park Power is your friendly local utilities provider in the electricity, natural gas, and internet game. You can compare rates, and if you bundle utilities with them, you can save a whole bunch of dough. Keep money in your pocket, including $70 on your first bill when you sign up with the promo code 2022-RealTalk at parkpower.ca. Well, this has been a very difficult week in our home city of Edmonton, including packed council chambers just a few days ago as downtown residents and business owners, particularly from Chinatown, showed up en masse to send a very clear message to Edmonton's city council. 36-year-old by the name of Justin Bone has been charged with second-degree murder in the brutal killings of 2 men, 61-year-old Ben Hook Huang and 64-year-old Hung Trang, both of them completely innocently walking downtown, going about their own business, and murdered. It's got people talking about what is perceived to be, and we're going to find out how legitimate that is right now, a rise in crime rates in some parts of Edmonton City, and it prompted a letter from Alberta's Justice Minister and Solicitor General, that's Tyler Shandro, to Edmonton's Mayor Amarjeet Sohi. This was late yesterday afternoon. This is a developing story. I'm not going to read the entire letter to you, but for context, a portion of it. Dear Mayor Sohi, this from the Solicitor General, the Justice Minister, Provincial Cabinet Minister, right? Keep in mind the dynamic there between the province and the city. Dear Mayor Sohi, I'm writing to you about the extremely concerning and unacceptable levels of crime in Edmonton's downtown core and on the city's transit systems. He goes on to say, as a Minister of Justice and Solicitor General, I have a responsibility under the Police Act to ensure the people of Edmonton receive adequate and effective policing. It's quite apparent that residents feel uncomfortable and unsafe in the downtown core, riding transit and traversing the transit center corridor. Some say it's simply too dangerous to use the LRT transit system or to go downtown. He goes on to say, and wraps by suggesting, he says, it is, in short, the people of Edmonton deserve better than what this city council is delivering. This from the Justice Minister. They deserve to be able to ride transit, visit restaurants, attend events, and browse through stores in a safe and welcoming environment. Public safety should be your priority, like it is mine. And these are fighting words. He says, at this time, I'm requesting you to take direct action to address this alarming situation. Within the next 2 weeks, I will require a public safety plan from you that will increase police response to this disorder and ensure members of the public can use Edmonton's public transit safely. I look forward to reviewing this plan soon. That from the Honorable Tyler Lechandro, Justice Minister. Oh, boy. So how did this letter land down at City Hall, where it has been a tough and emotional week? Let's find out. Andrew Knack is the city councillor for Ward Nakota Iska. Sarah Hamilton is the city councillor for Ward CP Winniwak. She's also a commissioner on Edmonton's Police Commission. And Councillor Erin Rutherford, is a representative for the constituents in Ward Inarnik. Thank you to the three of you for joining us. We appreciate your availability on relatively short notice. Councillor Knack, it looks like we've got you on the road, not driving, but on the road. Thanks for this. I want to ask all three of you, why don't we start with you, Councillor Knack? How did this letter from the Justice Minister land at City Hall yesterday?
It was surprising. I think, we are dealing with some very serious issues right now, and you touched on them at the start of this segment. We've had some tragic loss of life, and we have some very real safety concerns that we have to deal with. But Council's been working through them. We've been adjusting resources. We put together a fairly detailed action plan around how we're going to address community safety. And so I'm surprised because I'm not sure what makes Edmonton different than other locations. Other locations are struggling with different types of safety issues, and so I'm not sure why this happened the way it did. It doesn't feel like it's a very constructive approach for something that requires all orders of government really to be working together collaboratively to help address public safety.
Councillor Hamilton, you've been around City Hall for a while. When it comes to what's happening downtown, I mean, obviously a high-profile and tragic incident. Just a short time ago, we mentioned the brutal murders of these two men. Are the comments from the Justice Minister, to a certain degree, in a certain context, fair? I mean, are you concerned about a rise in crime rates downtown, on LRT, et cetera?
There's going to be some debate about how accurate his comments are. And I would say it doesn't actually matter. Perception is reality in this case. And what we heard on Tuesday in City Council is that residents, business owners in the area feel that City Council needs to step up in some way. They obviously do not feel that we have done our due diligence on this. And that is, the Justice Minister was in Chinatown yesterday and walked around, and he likely heard the same thing. We also haven't even gotten to the issues our staff are facing within our transit system. Maintenance is becoming harder for our staff to perform because they're afraid of being attacked in their workplace. That is obviously not okay. And I don't think any Edmontonian should be okay with what's happened. I know it's been severe in other cities as well, but we're not talking about other cities here. We're talking about our hometown and what we can do or haven't done to make it feel safer.
Councillor Rutherford, it's obviously been a tough week at City Hall. I mean, we see here, I'm showing a photo to those watching on YouTube. This is a photo that was in the Edmonton Journal. Council chambers absolutely packed with people that wanted their voices heard, that wanted their priorities noted. In particular, people talking about Chinatown and how they're feeling unsafe there. They feel that this is systemic racism. They feel that issues are not being taken as seriously in Chinatown as they are even in other parts of Edmonton's downtown. How have this week's events impacted you or resonated with you, a first-term councillor?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because I come from a background where I'm dealing with a lot of complex social issues in my previous career. And so it's been really interesting to see this unfold the way it has. What I heard from many folks is that this, while it's hit a tipping point and a boiling point, this isn't new to Chinatown. Many of the speakers talked about how this has been an erosion of Chinatown over a decade. And so I do agree that there is some systemic racism at play here. And one of the reasons that, not in addition to all of the stuff we've talked about with community safety and well-being and a pillar dedicated to anti-racism, we as a city have really taken a lot of steps to be more actively anti-racist. But that takes time. These systems don't change overnight. And I agree with my council colleague, Councillor Knack. It's not that we're not taking this seriously. It drives it home, the true nature of what we're dealing with here from this week's efforts. But since we've been elected as this council, we have been taking steps to, invest in transit safety, to work on changing the bylaws even around transit safety, to look at how we're creating that comprehensive community safety plan and investing in both our police, as well as making sure we're investing in some of those big drivers of crime, like addressing homelessness.
This was, I'm referencing reporting from Wallace Snowden, who does a great job with CBC News. And Wallace quotes the daughter, Christina Trang. I can't imagine walking a mile in her shoes right now. Her dad, Hung Trang, 64 years of age, was found injured outside Albert's Auto Body where he worked. This is one of the two homicides on the afternoon of May 18th, just over a week ago. He died in hospital the next day, an autopsy determining he died of blunt force injuries to his head. This is her dad she's talking about. And she says the senseless killing of her father. And counselors, I know you heard this because she said it to you. The senseless killings of her father and this other individual, Ben Phuc Huang, who was killed, 61 years of age, have shaken her confidence in the city's ability to maintain public safety in Chinatown. She said, quote, "Maybe if things had been different in Chinatown, my dad would still be with us today. How do you feel the situation in Chinatown currently is acceptable? When was the last time any of you stepped foot into that place?" I'm curious to know, like, with regards to your perspective as city councilors, what's going on there, what's happening, and this assessment, this first-hand testimony from a lot of people saying that this is racism, this is systemic racism. Councillor Knack, like, what does the real talk look like on this? I mean, what needs to happen here?
There's many different things that need to happen, and they need to happen all at once, and they need to get moving even quicker, because there's a real safety concern. I was there just about, I think, a week and a half ago, and you saw multiple different issues right happening at the same time. So we know that there are criminal elements. There are gangs that are operating that need to be addressed, and we need the police to be focusing their time and attention on them. At the same time, you go into the area there, and you see encampments set up. Over by the Bissell Center, there's empty lots that are filled with tents and individuals who don't have proper housing and support. And some of those individuals are being preyed upon by those who are doing the really bad things, the actual criminal elements. And so we need to make sure that those individuals can get the support and care they need. So it's not just one thing you need. The reality is true. There are some really challenging parts going on right now, and particularly in Chinatown. And it involves a police reaction, it involves a social support response, and it has to happen all at once. And I think from the city side, I hope that the actions that we're taking, some of the things that we've recently approved, will actually get us there.
Some interesting comments on our live chat. Councillor Hamilton, Plain Power says, so hang on a second. So one level of government strong-arming another is okay, referencing the province and the city of Edmonton. He goes, so one level of government strong-arming another is okay unless it's the feds interfering with the provinces? Okay, gotcha. Got it. Jason wonders, is there any chance that the Justice Minister Shandro here is just taking a shot at what is perceived to be a very left-leaning Edmonton council? Like, what's the significance of this letter, Councillor Hamilton? Because to me, I mean, on one hand, sure, it comes across like there's a legitimate... I don't want to... Let me say this, and let me just spell it out for our audience and for people that hear this. I am not diminishing the seriousness of these crimes. I am not diminishing the validity of people's concerns who are downtown. We own property. I lived downtown for a lot of years in Boyle Street. There's a lot of action in that neighborhood. I saw a lot of it. We still own a place there. We rent it out to people. I'm familiar with the issues there. It's a big urban center, right, with a complex population like most cities of 1 million people. But at the same time, I mean, this letter strikes me as I described it earlier as big dogging. Like it comes across as a little condescending, a little bit grandstanding, to be honest with you, quite inflammatory, quite frankly, suggesting that it's not a mayor's, that it's not currently, that safety is not the mayor's priority, that this council is not delivering on what it's supposed to deliver on, and giving an assignment to a mayor in an open public letter. Like, wow. So, I mean, what's happening below the surface here?
So legislatively, if you read between the lines on this, it is absolutely big dogging, as you would say. First of all, municipalities exist at the privilege of the Minister of Municipal Affairs. So we have no constitutional standing. The second piece is that this is unprecedented in my experience with this. And that 2-week deadline is extremely important, because what can follow if the Director of Law Enforcement and the Solicitor General are not satisfied with the policing plan is that they can essentially take over operations of our police service and any financial mechanisms essentially to fund that service. And they are funding it at what the service tells them they need to operate. So if you read between the lines here, I would say that this is directed at a council agenda that they do not believe has adequately addressed the safety needs of Edmontonians. And that includes the funding piece, which is extremely controversial right now. But they're absolutely dunking on us for that reason. And what do they have to lose, Brian? They have 1 seat in Edmonton, and they have everything to gain across the rest of the province of Alberta. And I don't like it, and you don't like it, and I guarantee my 2 other colleagues on here don't like it. But that's the game.
Yeah, I guess. So Councillor Rutherford, what are you going to do about it?
That's a great question. I think to Councillor Hamilton's point, this is unprecedented, but this is not the first time that they have done overreach. I go back to, this seems very reminiscent, even in my short tenure, of the mask discussion, right? So it seems like a tool that they're going to frequently use with this council when they don't like decisions that we're making. If we're calling it out in real talk, this is a direct result of the motion that I put on the floor at executive, is really, to me, what this comes down to.
Erin, can you take us into that? Like us civilians that have, to be honest, the majority of us really no idea what you're talking about. Can you dumb it down for us?
Sure. So at executive committee, we were discussing how going forward we're going to fund police. And so there was a few options on the table in terms of, bringing service packages forward, doing a funding formula, or, essentially freezing the police funding. And in addition to that, we also as a council needed to decide on a baseline. Now, there's debate about whether we needed that baseline now or later. I felt it was important to just put that baseline out early so that we have that honest, authentic conversation with the police commission. So the motion essentially said the baseline is current tax levy, and come back and tell us what you need at the fall budget with service packages. And it passed 3-2 at executive, and then was going to be coming to council for a bigger vote, because those are decisions that need to come to council as a whole with a recommendation from committee. So it's interesting to see what I would consider as quite a fiscally responsible motion in actuality get this kind of reaction.
We want to thank, by the way, we asked you, 3 of you, to stay here until we're doing this live. Obviously, most people will catch this later in the day, but they'll know that it's 9:31 Mountain Time right now, and so Councillor Knack did have a meeting that he had to bounce to. We appreciate his availability. Councillor Erin Rutherford, Councillor Sarah Hamilton, still with us. Sarah, you're on the Edmonton Police Committee. I think what's your position? You're described as a commissioner with the Edmonton Police Commission, right? That's the actual title.
Yeah, I'm one of two council representatives on the Edmonton Police Commission.
Yeah, you and Councillor Ann Stevenson. So I just want to get some clarity here. Most people, I don't know if they're like me, but our heads, numbers start swimming around in our heads, and we start talking about budget, and we lose our focus, and it's tough to throw a bunch of numbers around. So I don't want to do that. But right now, council, your colleagues, looking at potentially setting Edmonton's police operating budget at about $385 million. It's a little bit higher than the current allotment of the levy, as your colleague, Councillor Rutherford, was just talking about, but about $22 million less or lower than what police are currently receiving. So it's being spun or presented or discussed or debated as a cut to police funding, as a $22 million cut. And there's been some criticism from the province, and a lot of people are arguing for police reform, and a lot of other people are saying we need more officers and more patrols, not less. So can we just talk in plain language about what's going on right now, what the justification is, and what you perceive Edmontonians to value and desire when it comes to investing in or paying for or developing or growing how this city is policed?
What I continue to hear from people is that there's an ongoing tension between all of the things that we want to do and funding those core services. And policing, for every municipality, over 5,000 people in the province of Alberta, is the biggest driver of municipal costs, essentially. Whether you have the RCMP or you have a local municipal police service, it is going to be the biggest driver of costs. It's very labor intensive. Most of the costs are staffing people and having officers, and a trained officer tends to cost more, obviously. So I think, and I don't want to get too far into it, something that I think the city needs to consider across the board is how you sustainably fund all of our core services, whether we're talking about transit, policing, fire service. I have watched over the past 4 years a budget go up and go down and go sideways, backwards in all directions, and it goes with the winds of the economy. I think if we're talking about a fiscally prudent plan going forward and dealing with this government, having that sustainable plan for funding the core services, for meeting the expectations of Edmontonians, is fundamental. There's no other way around it. And I think that it gets away from the conversation of playing politics with police funding when you have a fixed, sustainable funding formula.
A former St. Albert city councilor that's watching right now, Gilles Prefontaine. It's always great to have Gilles chiming in here on our live chat. He says, as a former councilor, this makes me furious because this is all political and we need a council willing to say so. I think we have Hamilton on the record saying this is big dogging, so I'd say that counts. But I think it's also worth pointing out here that Edmonton's mayor has responded. Amarjeet Sohi, you can check it out at medium.com/Mayor Sohi. We hope to speak with the mayor on Monday morning. We'll see if he's available, and if I'm not in labor and delivery with Carrie, maybe we'll talk to Edmonton's mayor on Monday. But he throws a couple hand grenades back at the legislature. He says, I want to acknowledge the letter that Minister Chandro sent to my office earlier today. He wrote this last night, and the plan he asked me to prepare for the next 2 weeks. And he says, I share the same concerns about safety in our downtown Chinatown and on the LRT. He says, ever since I got elected, I've been raising these issues. He goes on to say, and I mean, here's where he returns fire, right? He says, council's investing in many issues that are the responsibility of the province, and frankly, they're falling short. He says, we know the reason we're seeing so much disorder downtown, in Chinatown, and on the LRT is due to a lack of investment from the provincial government. I have to say that I'm glad the minister has finally noticed this incredibly important issue that has been my top priority since being elected. I have desperately been trying to get the province's attention on this issue for months now. So I ask you, writes Edmonton's mayor, Minister Chandro, the Justice Minister, will you work with us to provide funding for our houseless population, for mental health supports, and for those suffering from the drug poisoning crisis to make our communities safe? Everybody knows that gif of the two guys having the middle finger fight. They just keep extending the middle fingers to each other. They're not saying, they're just giving each other. That's what this is right now. But the question is, what happens from here? The Solicitor General wants a report from Edmonton's mayor. Edmonton's mayor wants significant or meaningful funding here. So where does this go? Do either of you councillors have faith that this can result in a scenario where the city of Edmonton and the province of Alberta are meaningfully working together on something here? Or is this relationship just that strained, maybe even broken? I mean, what's your take on it, Councillor Rutherford?
You know, I would say this council is very relationship focused. And what I've seen in this council thus far is the ability to work with anybody that's willing to work with us for the betterment of Edmonton. I've seen that already, and I will have no doubt and the faith in my colleagues that if the province was to come to the table and want to discuss this issue, that we would happily engage in that dialogue. Because as I mentioned, you know, it's not, you know, we talk about police funding. Police receive $407 million. Chief McPhee himself said that he noticed the rise in crime downtown, but the resources were not reallocated. So there's so many questions that we still have to have between the police commission, the province, and city council. And I hope we do, because I think that is how we're going to create the outcomes that Edmontonians expect of us.
Councillor Hamilton, last word to you.
There is a glimmer of hope here that if there's a leadership opportunity, that if people can put their egos aside, this is an L for Edmonton. It's embarrassing, honestly. We have to get through it, but there is a glimmer of hope that we could maybe, just maybe, have a new deal on public safety here. Because the underlying thread in all of this is that the way things have always been done is not working for us. And so if there's one thing in a year, if we are successful, it will be because everyone put their egos aside and they started to listen to each other, because this is a direct result of two parties fundamentally not listening to each other. This is bad diplomacy in action, and it's really terrible because clearly the million people in Edmonton are suffering for it.
That's Councillor Sarah Hamilton, representing the Edmonton electoral ward CP Winniwak. Councillor Erin Rutherford from Inarnik. Am I doing okay in pronouncing your ward, by the way, Councillor Rutherford?
It's a Nulnik.
And Nulnik. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And it's great to have you making your debut on the show today. And we'll recognize Councillor Andrew Knack as well, who did everything he could to be with us all the way through till the end from Ward Nakota Iska. To the three of you, our thanks for this. I want to get to what our audience is saying on this. Real talkers, and you've got a lot to say on this. It was nice to see Troy Pavlik chiming in. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should. Some biting commentary on municipal issues, and you might argue that nobody really cares more than Troy does. He says, hey, listen, if we're talking in so-called plain language, then the police budget's actually $485 million a year once you factor in all the extra funding they take in, $500 million every year. He says the police commission and Chief McPhee love to play with the numbers and get people confused and talk about $22 million in cuts when council engages in their legal right to set the budget. Chad says it's hard to hear about costs increasing as my City of Edmonton taxes are up 20% this year. Tracy says over the last 20 years, my municipal taxes have been double-digit increases, starting with core services, and then, you know, use your communication tools to take a look at your want list after you've locked in those core services. A lot of you are convinced that this is the Justice Minister, Tyler Shandro, trying to throw a couple smoke bombs following the revelations around his investigation with the Law Society. You remember this back when he was health minister, of course, the showing up on the driveway, yelling at the doctor, grabbing, using his position, his privileged position to get phone numbers of members of the public and things like that. The Canadian Press reporting on this yesterday. He faces a 3-day Law Society disciplinary hearing in October for unprofessional conduct. That's Alberta's Justice Minister. That's the guy who wrote this letter. And then a whole bunch of you, I saw a bunch of comments back to back to back. A lot of you just saying this is politicking. Brenda says this is absolutely political. I saw Scarlett say the exact same thing. This is just Shandro politicking. Yeah, Lemon Tart says, I think it's a distraction by the minister after these revelations yesterday. Gilles again says this feels a lot like Shandro flexing because he was embarrassed by the media calling him out about lying about EPS funding. There's a trash talk email, a submission that's going to kind of fit in nicely with this a little bit. It's along different lines, but it's the same sort of a thing. Where there's a lot of flexing going on right now for a government, a provincial government that's arguably in disarray. I mean,
a lot of
the party leader just resigned.
And you're, yeah.
We'll get to that in just a second. We've got some business to take care of between now and then, and that includes reminding you that this weekend is a perfect chance for you to get out to a Dairy Queen in Sherwood Park on Baseline Road. You know, I learned the Baseline Road Dairy Queen in Sherwood Park is one of the top 5 busiest Dairy Queens. Like, revenue-wise, they are a top 5 location in the country.
I was just going to say, in the country, or
you were going to say what, in the Metro Edmonton region?
Yeah,
no, in Alberta. In the country.
Wow.
You could argue it's because of their amazing staff, whose faces explode into smiles when you let them know you're there because you heard about them on Real Talk. And then there's the Northwest Edmonton locations, my home turf, the Dairy Queen at Westmount. And then Palisades, Nemeo, and Newcastle. That's where you can pick up the Oreo Dirt Pie Blizzard Treat, a favorite with kids. The Cotton Candy Blizzard Treat. The Nestle Drumstick with Peanuts Blizzard Treat. That's my next one. Thinking that might be tonight. It's family pizza and a movie night. We're going to go grab Blizzards. Maybe it'll be the Very Cherry Chip Blizzard Treat. I don't know. All I do know is I'll be going to the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park to pick them up when I go. If I'm thinking solar, if you're thinking solar, maybe for your garden shed or your barn or your house or your cabin or your cottage or your industrial building, whatever it is, you're going to want to click on free quotes today at kubienergy.ca. You can learn more about getting that free quote, which includes, obviously, the installation. The cleanest installations you ever did see. I encourage you to follow Kubi Energy on Instagram. You'll be able to see the work they do. They've got a great photographer that does their Instagram. But I was talking earlier how you always like to have cables and everything lined up and nice and neat and tidy. You would love, but don't go to them.
The OCD.
You would love working for Kubi Energy, and they're hiring right now, by the way, in some pretty senior positions.
Really?
Yeah, if you've got your ticket, knock it off, Hixie. If you're an installer, if you're an electrician, a journeyman, an apprentice, they're always hiring for their locations in Alberta and BC at Kubi Energy. At Infinity Healthcare, we had a chance, both John and I, to hang out with their team, to do a little socializing last week, put some faces to names, and learn a little bit more about what drives them. These are
awesome folks.
What an unbelievable crew.
Yeah.
And we're talking to their licensed practical nurses, their LPNs, their RNs, the registered nurses, and then we're talking to their customer care aides. And these are people that when they talk about what they do and how they help families, you can see it in their eyes. They care deeply about making sure that people are getting reliable, premier care and community-based services. Did you know ever since April 1st, there's a new government program, you can allocate public health dollars that would be going toward your family's home care, but you don't have to take the assigned healthcare provider. You can choose the one that you think is a best fit for your family. Infinity can take you through that process and get you all hooked up. You can find them at infinity-8.ca. Now, every Friday, this is a tradition. It's how we wrap up our week. We give you a chance to blow off a little steam. We give you a chance to say what you need the world to hear, but maybe through a bit of a bigger amplification mechanism, if you know what I mean. It's an exercise we call Trash Talk. Yeah, that's right. Thanks to our friends at Local Environmental, we ramp things up, and it starts with this email from Melanie, who says, this is a PSA for all... Oh, earmuffs, kids, by the way, for the next 3 minutes or so. This is a PSA for all you grown-ass adults who work in grown-ass workplaces doing grown-ass jobs, but you can't keep your dirty dishes from piling up in the sink. It's disgusting. It's unclean. It's inconvenient. In fact, it's a pain in the ass, and I'm sick of it, says Melanie. I've done the good neighbor, do your dishes for you thing. I've done the leave a friendly note near the sink as a reminder thing. I've even tried the passive-aggressive nonverbal thing when I've seen the dishes dropped off by you and left in the sink. This Trash Talk submission is my last straw. Starting Monday, your dirty dishes are going in the garbage. Just try me. That from Melanie. I love that, Melanie. How about this one? This one from Gerald, who says, to whom it may concern, Oilers fans, as we creep closer to Stanley Cup glory, I feel the need to point out that the crowds downtown are getting bigger, louder, rowdier, and they're teetering on mob-like. And while most of the energy is positive, albeit somewhat drunken, I can see a time in the near future where it becomes just maybe too much. Let's keep our wits about us. Let's cheer on our team, but refrain from being obnoxious or abrasive to our fellow citizens. I love the Oil, says Gerald, just as much as the next fan. I love cheering them all the way to Lord Stanley's doorstep. I will indulge in a car flag, a throwback jersey, in place of a suit at work moving forward on game days, and a few brews, even on the weekdays when they're playing. But please don't burn this city to the ground like Vancouver does. As we continue to achieve success moving toward the finals, we still remember what it looked like back on White Avenue in 06 and in the 80s during the Dynasty years. White Ave's a beautiful place. I want to enjoy it through the summer as it is now. Not in ashes, says Gerald. This means businesses as well. We know they'll be jam-packed, understaffed, and slammed on game nights. Be kind, be cool, and above all else, stay classy, Edmonton. That from Gerald. I love it. I was tripping all over Gerald's words. Maybe because I was out celebrating last night. I don't know. That might be why. Gerald, I'm doing my best. How about this one? This one from Maurice. You load up that tweet for me. He says, this is a quick one for Brock Harrison, Jason Kenney's number one aide. Has anybody told this guy about the results of the leadership review? Is he aware that his guy got trounced again? An embarrassingly low return on the review. 51.4%, a resignation, a less than one and done legacy for Alberta's most embarrassing premier. Yet here's his lackey still throwing out his signature snark on Twitter, talking down to investigative reporter Charles Rusnell. Brock Harrison couldn't carry Rusnell's pen. Maybe if the architect of the disastrous Best Summer Ever campaign wasn't such a smug, petty prick, he wouldn't have to call in favors every 2 years to fall into a new job. Maybe if that entire premier's office wasn't being run by jerks, they wouldn't have lost the room like they did. Food for thought, Brock. Now beat it. That from Maurice, who says what he thinks and thinks what he says. Wow. And finally, this one from Jerry, who just snuck this in under the wire. Attaboy, Jerry, to talk at RyanJesperson.com. Wonder if you thought we'd miss it. We didn't, buddy. He says, we live in central Alberta, and there seems to be a sort of a deeply ingrained Alberta-Bama wild freedom convoy streak thing happening here on the daily. We still encounter many vehicles touting freedom convoy messaging, and the shitty part is that they're flying proudly Canadian flags in large numbers, and it's been so prevalent, so pervasive, so aggressive, so unforgiving, and so in our fucking faces that anger is the first emotion we feel when we see these anti-vax, anti-mask, anti-government, chaos-loving, anarchy-wielding misfits forcing this bullshit down our throats. They attack us with words and imagery and slogans and lies and guilt, and even with our own proud flag. And it's impossible to see a vehicle drive by with Canadian flags flying from the windows and my wife immediately not go, these idiots need to just fuck off and find something else to do already. What are they even protesting? What are they even doing? Don't they have jobs? They're ruining their children, and they've even ruined our flag. And it's true, says Jerry. He says it's hard now to see a vehicle driving around with the Canadian flag and not immediately judge its occupants. And that really sucks. So we've got work to do as Canadians to retake our flag, to regain our confidence in our systems, and especially, says Jerry, to hold our politicians in this country that supported this attempted takeover to account. It's a slippery slope from serving coffee to truckers, just asking questions about vaccines, to just trying to save unborn children by banning abortion, says Jerry. We can't let the few hold the many hostage, so vote any and all of these fuckers out, says Jerry. Cheers, Real Talk fam, and go Oilers, go! All right, Jerry bringing the heat. I'm going to throw that in the hopper as a contender for Email of the Month. We'll see. You've still got time to talk at RyanJesperson.com. Coming up on Monday for his bi-weekly spot, despite the emergency conference we had with him just the other day, the Titan of Talk is back, Charles Adler. We'll ask him how his Vegas vacation went. Plus other news of the day. In the meantime, Real Talkers, have an amazing weekend. Don't forget to register for the Real Talk Golf Classic, June 23rd at the Ranch. All the details under the events link at RyanJesperson.com. Talk soon. One love.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Technical producer John Hicks. Managing Director Josh Dunford. Account Coordinator Lawrence Sterlego. General Manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Website design Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory. the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is the flagship property of Relay Communications Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.